reasons.
All right. Hi, friends. My name is Michael Huffman. I'm the creator of the Sharp Readings videos. And this is the first time that I've met you all, I guess, but we're doing something a little different. We're not doing drawings today because I have written a book. Here's my book, Untie the Cords of Silence, published by Wendy. Okay, that was my son Silas. And my friend Wendy is here, and also her daughter Nina. And she's agreed to come on with me and talk about the book because Wendy, you read the book and it was helpful to you.
Yes, it really was.
So I'll just introduce Wendy. Wendy and I were colleagues at the International Gateway Academy in Istanbul. I was teaching high school religious education, and Wendy was teaching drama, literature, and what else? And art, yes. So, and she's back in the US now, living in San Antonio with her husband, Luke. And I am currently in Ecuador, where my wife is from, my wife, Isabel, and this is my son, Silas. And Wendy, you just finished your master's degree, your MA in international education. So you're a person of words, of education, of words, of communication, acting, art, writing, all that sort of thing.
Yes, at least theoretically.
Okay, so Wendy, thanks for coming. I really appreciate your willingness to talk about this with me. The first thing I wanted to ask you is just to tell us about your background. You didn't grow up in the United States, even though you are an American, according to your passport. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in the church where you grew up and how it relates to this topic?
Absolutely. I grew up as a pastor's kid. I moved to Ukraine when I was 2 years old, and then moved to Austria and then Czech Republic, where my parents served in international church ministry. Yes. And I grew up in non-denominational churches or interdenominational churches, which was what they call them in places where there's enough churches to have specific denominations. But even with them, my husband is in the background. Look at that. There you go. And throughout my life, I was taught, not in so many words, we didn't really talk about it, but just the complementarian ideology that man is the head of the household and of the church. And I never saw women preaching or being elders or even being deacons. And so I never really thought about it until I was in college. But it was more of that was just the way of the churches that I was a part of growing up. Yes. And that's how it made us feel. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
So you,
May I hand her off to my husband real quick?
Oh, sure.
We're back.
So your experience was of church, would you describe it as overall positive or
Actually,
mixture?
I think yes, overall positive. I was confusing in some ways, but also positive. A lot of things that were positive were the interdenominational aspect, how we were kind of open to believers in infant baptism. We were exposed to both. I think just the fact that there were people in the congregation that didn't think the exact same. I think that was really, really positive. I think the international aspect was really positive, seeing people worship in different ways. some people dancing, some people barely singing, and both equally worshipful in their own ways, and just experiencing locals like coming to the Lord and like worshiping in different languages was really beautiful. So I think that was really, really positive. And I would say my youth group was also really positive, which was a branch of the church. And so I think 75% was very positive, maybe even 80. It was really, really positive. And I grew up loving the Lord, really feeling his presence at church, and also being intellectually challenged and fed by good expository preaching, which I think was really positive.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so the reason I asked that is because a lot of people, I think, come to the topic of women and how women have been treated, and they have often personal negative experiences that have made them angry, and that sort of has been the start of their change of mind on the topic. That wasn't the case with me. I'm a man, so I could have started out by thinking, by like hearing people's stories and being upset about that. But for me, any anger that I felt has actually been after the fact, after I started to look into it more. So, so that's why I was asking that question. So on this particular topic, of whether or not men and women are equal, what made you decide that you wanted to think about this more or do some reading on it? Why did you read my book? I mean, we're friends.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons, but
Yeah.
but maybe it was
Well,
more than that.
I mean, college was kind of the start of the investigative process because I had a lot of, then I would just call it, subconscious beliefs. Now I would call it internalized misogyny. And it was just more like, if I ever saw a woman speaking, I would kind of subconsciously be like, what does she have to say? And then I was like, wait, that's awful. Why am I thinking like this? And so in college, I had a roommate that thought very differently from me in a lot of different ways. She was a foster kid from the Bay Area, California. And so of course her lifestyle was totally different. Like how she grew up was totally different. And her beliefs were really like challenging to the way I grew up. And so we had a lot of good conversations, and it sparked kind of this, why do I think this? And is that actually correct? Because I always kind of feared questioning the women in church leadership thing, because we're always taught that to submit to the Lord and like scripture. And so because I was like 18, 19 years old, I was like, what do I have to say to these pastors? Of course, why would I disagree with people that have been around the block theologically far longer than I have? And so I think I didn't really feel like I could humbly approach this subject in a sense. Like I was meant to be humble before God and man almost. And I started questioning that in college. And then when I moved to Turkey, I kind of felt like alone in that a little bit, because that wasn't the majority view. It's kind of, I don't know, I just felt like, oh, it's a liberal view, maybe it's not correct. And then talking to you and then a few others, I was like, these are people I theologically respect, and they actually think a different way. Maybe that is a possibly correct thing to think. Maybe I need to read more about it. Because the people that I was listening to at that point were like, this is just bad theology. And they would just dismiss it. They wouldn't even talk about it. They just say it's bad theology. And then I started to read about it. And the first book I read about it was actually borrowed from you. It was called Beyond the Curse. And it took me 7 months to read it, but I read it. It was also the first year of teaching, so I barely read anything. So
That's by Ida Besancon Spencer. That's a fantastic book. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
my
It's
favorite.
really good.
Yeah.
Very fantastic. And so that was really, really helpful. And then you were in the process of writing your book, and then I read your book. And then later I read The Making of Biblical Womanhood by Rebecca Barr. And that was like kind of echoing some of those things. I'm sure you read that book as well.
Beth, her
Um,
name is Beth, actually. Beth Allison Barr is her name. Yeah.
sorry. um,
Probably.
uh, yes. And that was just really, really fantastic. Um, so that those three books kind of sculpted the way I think about it now. So
Yeah, great. So I was wondering, how does how did you got married relatively recently? Was 3 years ago now? You got married?
yeah, almost 2 years ago.
Okay.
Wow.
And then you had a baby 5 months ago. So I have found that being being a father, especially I guess father of two daughters, my book is dedicated to my girls,
Mm,
Tamika and Polly, and that has sort of added urgency. It's sort of put some urgency into this topic for me.
mhm.
What is how has that affected you being married and also having a daughter now?
I think it's been really important, not just for me, but for my husband, Luke, because I think he kind of grew up thinking, like having almost this pressure on him to be almost more theologically mature than any woman he marries,
Mhm.
um, which I think is an unspoken kind of rule in this kind of hierarchy that we talk about. When in reality, like we need each other so much and we need to lean on each other and we need to make decisions together. I think that's really helped our marriage flourish and also kind of fight that anxiety and also just any kind of angst that I might feel being like, oh, well, I just need to listen to him instead being like, well, let's talk about it. And feeling that relationship in a different way. And I think that's been really, really helpful. And I think with having a daughter, I really do feel like we've been going to a church currently that does not condone or encourage women in church leadership and pastoral or elder positions. And I think that it was just sort of like, well, they got good preaching, they got good community, so it's fine. And now I'm like, it's not fine anymore. Like it's really, really important. And I think that as she grows up, I really, really want her to see what I did not see, and that is women preaching the word of God and working together and just that what I believe to be kind of a kingdom come ideology more so kind of living beyond the curse, if you will, from that one book. I really, really want her to see that because I mean, she might not grow up to want to be a pastor, but I know a couple really really amazing females, one of whom is my sister. I feel like would make excellent pastors. And I don't want what I did not see to impact them not becoming church leaders. So yeah.
Your sisters were my students. Your brother too.
Yeah.
We're students, in fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they wrote papers for me. This is one of the things that. So yeah, I guess this is the other question I wanted to talk about was as an educator and especially a person like yourself who's educating people in communication, you know,
Mhm.
skills about communication. But yeah, just as a religious education teacher, I had my students writing papers, and
Mhm.
I had fantastic papers from my boy students. But I also had fantastic, not but and I had
Yeah.
equally fantastic theological reflection and um, just wonderful work from my female students, and including your sisters. And it's just one of the things that bothered me, because I just knew that many of them, even if they were in an environment where there wasn't a bias against women in ministry, many of them would never see a woman pastor, a woman in that role, or just a woman preaching, a woman confidently sort of just not worrying about what her gender is, simply proclaiming the word and teaching and being in that role. So that's another thing that added urgency for me to this project. So as an educator yourself, you're very committed to this. You've even gotten your master's degree at this point. And how does believing that men and women are both equally called by God to communicate in any sphere where God calls them to be, how does that affect your outlook on education as a person who does that?
I think there was a point to which I was very much like, I just want to teach in a non-Christian sphere, because I almost felt too liberal for the Christian sphere. Like I would get emails from parents and stuff, being like, you have a lot of tattoos, or whatever, or like, art history, what do you do with our kids? Another conversation for another time. But I think that actually I really love the idea of continuing to educate, and build up Christian students. And I think that as a woman educator, I walked into education wondering how to behave and how I would be listened to as a woman, let alone kind of a young, not very tall woman. Just like all these things that don't contribute to being listened to in society and in the church. And I think that I'm more and more just aware of that divide of having to fight for respect and to be listened to. And if there's any place that should not be, it's the church. And I think that I'm more and more just convinced of that. And so as an educator, I would love to foster relationships with students who are questioning those things, who are wondering what that looks like to be a Christian, and who have grown up maybe in a way that I did, just kind of posing a different view. I think that would be really, really helpful as someone who would have like a relationship to them as kind of like a mentor. Just to know somebody thinks that way, because I don't think I had anyone that kind of posed a different view on that growing up. But I don't know if that answers your question. I feel like kind of vaguely ties in, but I don't know what you were looking for exactly.
Yeah, I was just looking for your reflection on that. And I'm sure there's a lot of ways in which this topic touches your calling. But yeah, particularly as an educator, you're hoping that, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but it does seem to me that girls need an extra measure of confidence, an extra encouragement to sort of offset the situation that we've created for ourselves, right?
Yes. And I would say I do have the confidence, but it did not come naturally. Right. And when you do have the confidence, you are so often told that you are too much, that you are too loud or too, I don't know, too much.
Okay. Well, thanks, Wendy. I appreciate your talking to me. And thanks you do recommend this book to people.
5 stars. I do.
And I really appreciate that. I hope that it is helpful for people. And yeah, I think that one of the things that really stands out to me from this conversation is that is just your points about how subtle this issue can be and how it affects people as they develop and as they grow up. Even when you have a positive experience of church, you still absorb certain ideas that you don't really realize until later in life how they've affected you. And I think that for a man, it's something that men have to work a little bit harder than women to understand, because women get it pretty easily. But men aren't often privy to those conversations that women are having when the men aren't around. And so we don't realize the way that we behave and affects women, even when it's not overt, but the way that women's voices are not received in the same way. So yeah, thank you. And I guess we'll just end the conversation here. It's the first time I've done this, so not very good at it, but I think this has been really
Thank you
good.
so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Sharp readings.